Thanks for joining us on our fifth webinar in our Essentials of Business Security series. In this video, you have me, Kat, from 1Password, and I'm going to be talking with Daniel, who is the Communications Manager at DuckDuckGo. Hi, Daniel.
Hello there.
Cool. So we're going to be continuing on the subject of blocking extensions and what businesses can do to safeguard data today. Daniel, do you want to first introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about DuckDuckGo for those who might not know?
Yes, we started as a search company, although maybe 18 months ago we shifted beyond search. Now we have a browser extension and a mobile app which protect you as you search the web in general. So not just search, we've become a general online privacy company. My role within that is communications manager, so dealing with social media, blog, press outreach, and we've just launched a new privacy newsletter as well to try and keep people informed about privacy related happenings.
Very nice. Oh, so you talked about being a privacy company. How do you think private browsing has evolved since you've been at DuckDuckGo, or in the last few years even?
I've been at DuckDuckGo for almost 4 years, and I was actually a user for a few years before that as well, when it was still in its infancy and just about usable if you were a bit of a nerd and prepared to put up with the quirks. How has it changed? Well, that's how it's changed. It was originally, in fact, private browsing in general was really a sort of niche thing. And DuckDuckGo first launched on Hacker News, a website called Hacker News, which is really aimed at people into technology at a very deep level. That's where it grew. What I've seen change is that I said privacy earlier, I should say privacy, is a mainstream issue. And now we see, I don't want to say ordinary people, now we see non-technical people starting to be concerned based on what they see on the news, based on the sort of emails that they get and ads they see following them around, that, okay, wanting to stay private is not sort of a geeky thing. It's not just for the technical people. This is something that affects everybody. That's the big shift I've seen, the big mindset change.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And certainly people are learning more and more about how their data is being used. As you said, sort of people realizing where they're being tracked and targeted with these adverts. You know, even my mum the other day was saying, I bought this jacket online and I bought it, and now they keep trying to sell it to me online. You know, every website I go to keeps trying to sell it to me, and so, you know, even if my mum's talking about it, then people definitely who aren't tech savvy are talking about it.
We'll put that on the blog. Kat's mum indicates mainstream audience. But you're exactly right. And it starts off as being something annoying. And then it starts to get a little bit creepy. And then when you realize what could happen if somebody effectively has access to all your data, whether it's medical data, private data, sort of financial data, whether they're trying to take over your identity, it's downright scary and dangerous, the different levels that you go in terms of privacy abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite frightening when you think about how much personal data is actually out there and where it's being kept and how safely. So for people who are just starting to think about their privacy and all of this kind of where their data is being held online for the first time, where do you think they should start? Like, what would you advise for them as the best steps that they should look to take?
Well, the way that our personal data is sort of taken from us, or the way we lose control of it, is when we're searching different websites, there are things called trackers on websites. And that is little bits of code within an advert, for example, or within a Facebook like button, which knows what you're looking at. It knows that you're looking at this page on a blog, or it knows that you just search for this thing on this website. Those trackers often belong to big networks, usually advertising focused networks, and they collect that data not just from that one website you're viewing, but if you go to another website and it's got a tracker from the same company, that company now knows, oh, first you went to this website, then you went to that website, and then you went to this website and searched for this thing. It really builds up a very, very detailed profile of you. So these tracker networks effectively around the web, there are several of them, but Princeton University did a study a couple of years ago looking at trackers on the top 1 million websites. And they found that 75% of those 1 million websites had trackers from Google-owned networks on. And the next biggest offender was Facebook, which has trackers on 25% of the top million websites. So every day when you search, it's very, very likely you're going to be monitored by either a tracker from Google or a tracker from Facebook. Therefore, the biggest thing you can do is reduce your usage of Google and Facebook, because they are effectively the biggest networks that track people around the web. It can be hard. We have a very popular blog post which suggests alternatives to various Google products and services. I should say the address actually. It's spreadprivacy.com is the name of our blog, where we have various tips and things. And on there we have an article which lists alternatives to Google, Google Search, Gmail, things like that. And some of them are really easy to do. For example, the alternatives to Google Chrome. There are different browsers, such as Firefox, Vivaldi, Brave, Safari, that are more privacy focused, but more than that, they're not owned by a big tracking network. And it's super easy. You still can browse the web just like you would with Google Chrome. There's effectively no difference. So there are several things people can do. And I think the biggest thing is to try and avoid Google and Facebook. I know it may be difficult for some people, but at the very least, you can just give it a try, and that's going to have a big effect.
Oh, yeah, those are some really good first steps. I'm definitely going to go through mine now and take a look. Those are quite a lot of things that we can do as individuals. And, as we learn more and more about the kind of steps we can be taking and the dangers of letting other companies store or even sell our data, as we learn about those, we're going to look after ourselves a bit better, I hope. What would you say about how we can benefit from using something like DuckDuckGo in a business environment?
We have, as I mentioned earlier, a search engine right from the beginning. It's over 10 years now we've had a private search engine, and our focus has really been to make it as simple to use as possible. We want there to be no trade-off when people use a private service compared to using a regular service that they might be used to. So we've really tried hard to build, first of all, the search engine so that there is no disadvantage to using it just because it's private and your searches are anonymous. The thing that we've done more recently is developed the what we call Privacy Essentials. For desktop, it's a browser extension that you can add to Firefox or Vivaldi or whatever. And on mobile phones, it's an app, which is effectively, it's just a browser. The only difference is it blocks these third-party trackers, the one that I was talking about earlier from Facebook or Google, for example. When you're on some unrelated website, the Facebook trackers or whatever in the background will be blocked. Although that's an individual thing, from a business point of view, your staff having that is going to benefit them. On the one hand, protecting their data. On the other hand, it's sometimes it would get rid of distractions and just save bandwidth. But when we think about search as well, search is some of the most sensitive stuff that we do. On the one hand, it could be personal, medical or financial information. But also, if it's in a work context, it could be some kind of business secrets that we're searching for that potentially, could get out there. And so, to be on the safe side, we want to have a private search engine. We also, this may be for larger businesses, but we also have enforced safe search as an option on the browser, on the search engine. So our regular address is duckduckgo.com, but we also have safe.duckduckgo.com, where it's not possible to switch off safe mode. There's just no option to do that. And so a systems administrator can use that across their network. On our help pages, we have advice about how to change the DNS settings for that at a network level, so they can then do that for the whole company. So the whole company is then with one switch of a button using DuckDuckGo's safe search. That's a couple of options there. One thing I should mention about the browser and the mobile app, the browser extension, the mobile app, is again we've tried to make it so there's no trade-off when you use them. When you choose privacy, you're not sacrificing something. And so they're as simple to use as possible while still protecting you in the background. So we don't give you lots of configuration options before you can get using it. You just effectively install and go. And from a business point of view, I think that's important, not to get it in the way of your employees.
Yeah, absolutely. Because ultimately, we're going to take the easiest routes and we're going to use what we know. So at the moment, probably, unfortunately, that is Google. But yeah, you've got a great interface with DuckDuckGo, so it's an easy transfer. We
say that we want privacy to be as simple as closing the blinds. So in the offline world, the physical world, you close the blinds. In the online world, ideally, you install DuckDuckGo, and that's it. You forget about it.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that. So if businesses are going to go down the route to try and secure themselves a bit better and take some different steps, what do you think the main concerns that they should be looking at when they're looking at new services? What should they be looking at to make sure that they're not under threat or in danger of any kind of privacy breach when they're using a new service? What advice can you give to business owners?
Yeah, this is very hard. I think the law has helped us a little bit there. For example, not too long ago, we were looking at using a new service, and this is since GDPR has come into force in Europe. It's been just over a year now, and that changed things a lot. So now one easy thing to do is just ask the service, are you GDPR compliant? And that at least gives you sort of a base level of compliance with a new law that is really pro-consumer. There are similar laws coming over in the US. It looks like it's going to be state by state where they're enforced. But first of all, California is due to bring in a new law next year called CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act, which has some similar protections to the GDPR. I think we're going to see that as a trend spreading throughout, not just North America, but hopefully spreading throughout the world eventually. That is something that is a really good thing to use. So are you GDPR compliant or CCPA compliant or whatever the law is in that particular region is a really good first step. Next thing is to go through the privacy policy and things like that, which I know is hard work. So this is where I recommend getting legal help. And if it's a decent sized business, then there's likely to be a legal office or a general counsel or something like that. So that is the next thing. Beyond that, it does get tricky, but I think trust is very important. And trust comes from not just your privacy policy or whatever, but the way a business acts in general. And this is something we would like to see more, regardless of people's approaches to privacy. We'd like to see more trust as a whole. Our vision is to raise the standard of trust online. And that comes through other things like being more transparent, through keeping users informed about changes, or it was Buffer I saw the other day on their About page. They actually have a transparency section where they include links to things that they're trying to keep as open as possible. For example, open source projects they work on. In their case, even staff salaries they put up there. In our case, we make all our traffic open. We have a page, duckduckgo.com/traffic, where you can go and see our daily visits. We don't know who they are. They're all private. It could be one person searching millions of times a day, but we make it all open. So there are things that companies can do to kind of instill trust. And when they do that, I think that also reflects internally as well. The staff sort of feel they're part of something that is not just about making money. There's some kind of there are values that the company is trying to adhere to. And then externally, people looking towards that company, they're going to feel more confident about entrusting them with their data. So the regulations and legislation that is starting to improve is helping. And then we'd like to see businesses sort of make the effort as well to think more about their privacy, how they handle data, and also instill trust by being open and transparent.
That's really interesting what you say when you talk about trust and how it spreads internally in businesses as well. As you can see, I'm proudly wearing my 1Password t-shirt today.
I like it, yeah.
And at 1Password, we don't track our users and we don't follow them around the internet. We do no retargeting with our marketing, and it's something that we feel really strongly about. And we're the only ones in our industry that really can say that truly. And it's, I work for 1Password and I'm proud because of that. So
yes, it's more about just having a daily job. You're doing something because you believe in what the company is standing for. I'm sure I'm speaking for you here, but I'm sure that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, I think from the consumer point of view, as I said, the privacy is becoming, we believe it is now a mainstream issue. And so it's almost like a business feature when companies start to do this, start to make these changes. It can also be a kind of marketing tool. I don't think people should do it for the marketing, but if you're being more transparent or being open, that's something that's going to endear you to consumers and effectively lead to more growth. I think customers more and more are going to move towards that kind of company.
Certainly, as people get more in the know, it's becoming in the forefront of everyone's minds. So, well, I mean, what do you think would need to change for more businesses to make privacy a priority, for more businesses to stop with the retargeting and the tracking?
First of all, consumer pressure. It accounts for a lot. And we do see this where there's a relatively recent scandal with email tracking that was discovered. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to mention the company name, but a company was discovered sort of basically tracking users through email, which is kind of overlooked in terms of how risky it can be in terms of working out what you've been looking at, or connecting a person's email address with the content that they're viewing. Anyway, there was a big I don't think there was legal action, but there was it somehow broke. Consumers were very, very angry, and very quickly they changed their policy. Not perfectly, I don't think they went far enough, but pure pressure from the public made them change the way they work effectively. So people just being vocal and trying to take action themselves does have an effect. So consumer power is one way. I mentioned legislation earlier, and in some cases legislation is needed. Consumer power, as strong as it is not enough. For example, just recently Facebook, in fact yesterday as we're recording this, Facebook was hit with a $5 billion fine in the US from the FTC. They actually budgeted for that. They had a shareholder call, I think earlier in the year, where they said, we're preparing $5 billion because we might get a big fine. Sure enough, it came along. It frustrates me, but that's effectively, it's like a line item. It's like, how much does it cost to abuse privacy? Okay, this much, right? We'll prepare that then and just carry on as we were before. It needs stronger legislation to actually make businesses stop doing that and change their business practices, or change the structure of the business, maybe, break up sort of some of the giants that hoard a lot of data. So legislation is coming. It takes time, but we're really pushing for it. We actually proposed our own legislation. Obviously, we can't enforce it, but we proposed it in the hope that lawmakers would pick it up. And that was to respect the do not track setting in browsers. I don't know if people know, but many browsers have a setting which says ask websites to not track me. It's called do not track. And lots of people do. In a survey we did, almost 25% of people actually enable that setting, which is surprising because most people don't even know where the preferences are in their browsers. So for that many people to actually go and change that setting means people really care about it a lot. Unfortunately, there's nothing to force a company to respect it. It's just completely optional. And so we'd like to see that enforced. If people change the setting in their browser to say do not track me, then websites must not track them with third-party trackers around the web. That's what we'd like to see. The legislation also affects not just the companies that we deal with, like the obvious ones like Facebook or whatever, but also there are data agencies behind the scenes. So let's say there's an app developer, he makes a free, or he or she, sorry, makes a free app. To get a bit of income, you can either sell that app, although you'd have fewer installs, or you can put adverts on it, or you can just collect the data from the users and then sell that data to third parties. And there are frameworks to do this very easily now. So as I mentioned earlier, a weather app that collects your location every 5 seconds, that will all be being sold to a data agency. And as end users, you and I have no idea who these data agencies are, what the company name is, or where they're based. So there's no way for consumer power to sort of push back on them. We don't know who they are. That's where stronger legislation is needed. And finally, the third thing I think is competition. The more we see companies in the space like ours who are making, what ours I mean, both yours and mine, that are sort of taking efforts to go beyond what customers expect and actually so almost proactively provide a private alternative. The more companies start to do that, the more that competitive pressure puts other businesses in a position where they effectively need to change to continue to compete. That was a long answer, but those three: consumer power, strong legislation, and strong competition in the marketplace.
No, that was a great answer. Really, really well explained, and those 3 points definitely really important. So thank you. So on the flip side, I mean, we've talked a lot about individuals. So taking it a bit more back to business to business tracking can often be a lot more invasive than business to consumers. You mentioned earlier that the risks of someone following you when you're looking up a competitor, or maybe finding out your business secrets that way. Also, another example would be using reverse IP lookup. Are there any tactics that you would recommend to businesses that they can use just while they're operating online to protect their privacy?
It's very difficult, I think, because to a certain extent, a business only has so much control over what their staff do, and as soon as they sort of walked out the door, effectively, staff could potentially do anything. But there are some best practices that are both in the interest of staff and the company that should be encouraged. I think phishing is a big risk where it could be just some malicious actor who just wants to steal someone's information. It could be a business competitor who is trying to get specific information from or use a specific person within that company to get into the system. So in that case, it's very important to protect against phishing, and one way of doing that is to enforce two-factor authentication, because sometimes phishing is used to then log into email account, for example. Two-factor authentication can sometimes help with that, in that you need a separate device, usually your phone, to be able to log into a service. So not just password, but something else. It could be the phone, it could be hardware, something like a YubiKey where you put it in the USB slot and have to press a button in addition to the password. So two-factor authentication, I think, is very good for keeping accounts safe. Phishing is tricky. There was a very good podcast called In Real Life, and one episode they actually looked deeply into phishing. And it's really, really easy to be fooled. And sometimes we think, it's these scam emails, I've seen them before, I know what they look like. I'm not the kind of person that falls for that. But when it's done well, it's extremely difficult. And what admin teams or security staff within companies can do is just keep their staff aware, either by just generally letting them know, or actually trying to catch them out. This is, you may want to get approval before you try this within your company, but could be just trying to, send an email within your staff and seeing if people respond. I would sort of make sure you know what you're doing before you do that. But it's super, super easy to be fooled by very intelligent phishing attacks sometimes. So I would be careful of that. That's a bit scary. Let's move on to something a bit easier, which is using a VPN. You mentioned reverse IP lookups, and just in general protecting traffic. What a VPN does is it effectively sort of changes your IP address. It effectively makes you, to all intents and purposes, be in a different location from the point of view of the website that you're visiting. But what it also does is it provides a secure tunnel from you to the website you're visiting. The way this can protect is that if you're using the Wi-Fi in a cafe, for example, and the website you're looking at does not have HTTPS, it doesn't use a secure encryption for its traffic, then anybody else in that cafe using that Wi-Fi can effectively see everything that you're looking at. They can see the page that you're looking at. They can even see the content. They can see what you're typing in a form and sending. So HTTPS, first of all, websites should use HTTPS. If you're setting up a website, please use HTTPS. And if your staff are going to take their computers outside the office and browse on public networks, then they should be using a VPN. So one thing companies can do is provide a subscription to a VPN service to each member of staff, and then encourage its use, because it's very easy just to get the subscription and forget to enable it later.
Well, those are some really good tips. Certainly phishing and using VPN, got to be aware of all these things.
Another thing is either a security audit or a privacy audit, ideally both. Every, let's say, 3 months, you have a recurring task that goes out to all staff, and what we have internally is we use a project management system where you get assigned a task, and when you've completed it, it can send an alert or whatever to somebody. And so if I'm a sysadmin, I would like it if I could send everybody a task to run their quarterly security audit, checking their browser extensions and deleting any unnecessary apps and that kind of thing. And if somebody hasn't completed that, then you sort of try and investigate and remind them, because it's very easy to forget about these things when you've got other things to concentrate on.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it's usually the time that you it's the one thing that you don't want to have to think about. So, and usually by the time you are having to think about it, something's gone wrong. So
yes, exactly. Yeah, by the time it's in the news or whatever, then it's too late.
It's too late. So you mentioned sort of rolling these things out to teams, and I guess that can seem a bit daunting if your team's, thousands of people big. What kind of advice would you give to roll out security measures to entire teams, as a business owner, to manage that and roll it out?
A lot of it, I think, comes down to awareness. And so, fortunately, all these privacy scandals that are happening are doing the job for us, in that they're making everybody more and more aware. So that's a really good sign, is that privacy is now a mainstream issue. So any message that the sysadmins or whatever are going to put out is being supported by what people are seeing in the news. So it's already, a lot of the job is done there. People are becoming more and more aware of the importance. So that could just be reinforced, I think, by, if something happens, a message going out saying, hey, you might have seen this over the weekend. What happened to this company? We don't want that to happen to us. Therefore, don't forget to blah, 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 blah. So it's not really any technical action. It's just a reminder that goes out, but using something that is very recent in the public eye to sort of reinforce the message. That way you don't get staff sort of rolling their eyes saying, oh, sysadmin's on my back again for no reason, blah, blah, blah. Haven't they got anything better to do? If you can tie it in with something that is happening, and sadly there are lots of privacy breaches that are happening, then it's really, people are kind of already bought in before the sysadmin is going to send that message. I think that's a really strong way of looking after the company. Another thing is going back to what we were saying earlier, what the company values are. And if it's trust and it's transparency, then keeping not just staff data protected, but keeping customer data protected kind of becomes a natural extension of that. This often comes from the top down, I think, from leadership down. If the core values of the company are based around trust and honesty and sort of protection, if you like, then naturally that's going to flow down to people's everyday behaviour. And then if there's something happening, if people kind of forget that, then I think it's every member of staff's responsibility to say, hey, just realise that in the database we're not encrypting this piece of data. I think we should be. They're less likely to get sort of ignored if from the top down there is this like message of trust, transparency, and treating customer data as valuable information, which it is.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned kind of it coming from the top down there, and I guess there's an argument to say, is it managers and security officers who should be the ones that are solely responsible for this, or is it the individuals, every individual that works at that business? So it's an interesting one, and to educate everyone is obviously really an important thing, and then to get that filtration from top down, so it's everyone's responsibility.
Yes, I don't want to sort of sound dictatorial when I say from top down. I don't think there should be somebody at the top saying you've got to do this and you've got to do that. You don't think about why, just do it. I think that's obviously completely wrong. I think when it comes to the leadership, what comes top down should be the direction of the company and the core values and the mission of the company. Ideally, I think it should be bought into by everybody in the company and perhaps decided upon by everybody in the company. But ultimately, that sets the tone for the company. But equally, it's everybody's responsibility, regardless of position, to I want to say buy into, not their responsibility to buy into it, but their responsibility to stand up for the values that are hopefully instilled within the mission statement or the core values. And not everybody has access to everything that happens in a company. If it's a big company, then obviously it's just not practical. So that's where it's a responsibility of everybody to stand up, even for the small decisions. So even if it's like one small thing, like we've got these people's database email addresses in this database, but we're not actually using it. So maybe we can delete them. Or let's say we're storing people's email addresses. Maybe we should be deleting them after 90 days. And it's perhaps on its own it might not appear to be a big risk, but just the fact that somebody is raising that as a question triggers people to start thinking about, oh, okay, I hadn't thought about the privacy aspect of it. But yeah, that seems like the right thing to do. And I think that just helps support the mindset of putting data protection as a priority.
That's really interesting. Thank you for that, Daniel.
No, I'm not saying I have all the answers, by the way, but these are some of the things that that we see happen a lot. When we see these scandals and these disasters happen, sometimes the sort of the information that comes out is so obvious. Like, why on earth would you do it like that? Why on earth would you store passwords in a file named passwords? And why on earth would you keep let's say this piece of information when it's has no sort of clear business use? It's sometimes frustrating.
Hopefully, as we take learnings from those cases where things have gone wrong, we can put better practices in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. So
yes, one thing also I'd like to mention is that what we've tried to do at DuckDuckGo is not just offer a private service in the case of search initially and now the browsing extension, but also base our whole business model around privacy. And what I mean by that is that people often ask, okay, so how do you make money then if you don't track service? If you're not building up a detailed profile of me, how are you making money? Because surely that's the only way to do it. No, it's not. We're trying to demonstrate that there is an alternative. And we do get most of our revenue through advertising. It's enough to make us profitable for the last few years. And the advertising that we show is called contextual advertising, not behavioral advertising, which is what big tracker networks would do. Contextual advertising works by showing an ad based on what the user is seeing at that particular time only. In the example of search, you would search for a car and we would show you an advert for a car or something, advert for car-related item or service. If somebody's searching a website and let's say it's about knitting, then that knitting website might show an advert for something knitting related without knowing anything about the person, without keeping their data or sending it anywhere. They know that person's interested in knitting, so it's very likely that a knitting advert is going to be relevant for them. And this is really effective. It's working for us. We're only using contextual advertising. You search for a car, we show you a car advert. The next search you do is for a phone, and we've forgotten that you search for a car. Actually, we don't even know that you're the same person because each ad is effectively unique, and then each search is unique, and then you're effectively a different person the next time you search. It works. We've shown that it works. It's supporting our business. Our traffic is growing because people like that model. And so we would like more and more businesses to adopt this. So when we talk about what businesses can do to have a more sort of pro-privacy approach, it's not just internally how they handle customer data, but it's the whole business model. And it might be not even keeping that data in the first place. So it's not just the sort of the staff attitude, it can be the whole strategy in itself.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for clarifying those two different methods of advertising, and yes, it's really good to see how DuckDuckGo are kind of leading the way in this sector. So well done.
We hope so. We just want more people to do it.
Certainly at 1Password, we find it we don't hold anyone's data, and that's how we can't lose anyone's data. We don't have the secret to give up, so it works.
Exactly, and it simplifies things as well. I mean, it's almost a win-win.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for today. Do you have any final security tips or takeaways for businesses about secure browsing or privacy in general that you'd like to share?
Protecting privacy is one thing. The greater thing is how can we have a more trust online in the way we run businesses and the way we or work within our businesses. I think it's through treating people's data with respect, whether that's other staff or whether that's customers. I think it's being about more transparent. And sometimes, this can actually work not just in the case of we're protecting ourselves so that, if there's a breach, we're covering ourselves. Not just that, but going beyond that. And as I mentioned earlier, using it as a strategy, almost using it for marketing. If you document the approaches that you're using, that in itself is going to appeal to consumers. So it's there are many more aspects to it, I think, than just, what do we need to do to protect ourselves and stop it there. It's there's a lot of opportunity out there, I think, for embracing trust, transparency, and privacy.
Absolutely. Really interesting time to be involved in this area as well. I'd love to see in 10 years' time when we look back at what's happening today and say, was that ever allowed? I hope that's the case.
Yes, I agree. One thing we've been thinking about is actually when you look back, let's say, I don't know, 5-10 years, the antivirus was a sort of a category all by itself, and it was obvious, to any user, no matter how technical, I need to have an antivirus on my computer just to protect me. They maybe didn't know what it did, but they knew they needed one. In the same way, at the moment, we're moving towards that stage where people are going to want some kind of way of protecting their privacy, because they might not know how it works, but they just know they need it because the awareness of the issues are much more widespread. We're getting there. It's a mainstream issue now, and yeah, DuckDuckGo's position is to just make it, as I said earlier, as simple as possible for people to have the protection they deserve, the privacy they deserve.
Super. Well, thank you very much, Daniel. That's everything we've got time for today.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate that, and enjoyed it. And I've enjoyed watching the other episodes in the series as well. You have some very interesting guests.
Perfect. Keep doing what you do.
Thank you, and you too.